The sharp sting of paper cuts had become so familiar that I barely noticed them anymore. My fingers moved automatically through the endless stack of court documents, the rhythmic thump of the stapler punctuating the silence of my small office at the federal prosecutor's building. Each staple felt like another second ticking away on a clock I couldn't see but knew was running down. 3 months. That's how long I'd been buried in this corruption case, drowning in evidence that kept leading to more questions than answers. Judges, politicians, businessmen, all connected by a web of financial transactions and sealed documents that painted a picture of systematic blackmail. Someone was pulling strings throughout the entire city's legal system, and I was the only one who seemed to see the pattern. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that persistent buzz that had become the soundtrack to my late nights. My office was a converted storage room, barely big enough for a desk, a filing cabinet, and the tower of evidence boxes that seemed to multiply every time I turned around. No windows, no ventilation, just concrete walls and the lingering smell of old paper and stale coffee. I reached for my mug, the ceramic cold against my palm. The coffee inside had gone cold hours ago, a brown sludge with a film on top that made my stomach turn. But I lifted it to my lips anyway, forcing down a sip. The bitter taste coated my tongue, metallic and wrong. My phone buzzed, making me jump. Another unknown number, the 4th one today. I'd stopped answering after the second call when all I heard was breathing on the other end before they hung up. My hand trembled slightly as I set the mug back down, coffee sloshing over the rim and soaking into a witness deposition. "Damn it," I muttered, grabbing tissues from the box on my desk. The paper disintegrated as I pressed it against the spreading brown stain, making the mess worse. The witnesses' typed words blurred and ran, rendered illegible. 3 hours of work ruined. I pressed my palms against my eyes, seeing stars in the darkness behind my eyelids. The exhaustion was bone deep, the kind that sleep couldn't fix. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks, my dreams haunted by faceless threats and the sound of footsteps following me home. Because someone was following me. I knew it with the same certainty that I knew my own name. Diana Matthews, federal prosecutor, target. The pattern had started small. A car that appeared behind me too often. The same man in a gray jacket standing outside my building 3 days in a row. My mail arriving opened, the tape carefully replaced but never quite right. My apartment door unlocked when I knew I'd locked it. Small things. Deniable things. Things that made me question my own sanity until they accumulated into undeniable truth. Someone knew what I was investigating. Someone wanted me to stop. Someone wanted me scared. And God help me. It was working. My office door opened without warning, the sudden movement making me nearly knock over what was left of my coffee. My supervisor, Richard Hendricks, stood in the doorway, his face set in that permanent expression of disapproval he seemed to reserve specifically for me. "Matthews," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "You're still here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Working on the corruption case, sir. I've found some new connections that I think—" "Leave it," he cut me off, his tone flat. "The case is being reassigned." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Sir, I've spent 3 months on this. I'm close to something. I know I am. These connections between the judges and—" I said leave it. His voice was sharp now, his gray eyes cold. "You're too close to this case, Diana. You're seeing conspiracies where there are just coincidences. Your judgment is compromised." "My judgment is fine," I insisted, standing up, my legs unsteady beneath me. "Someone is systematically blackmailing public officials. I have evidence. Documents that show nothing conclusive," Hendricks interrupted. "You're chasing shadows, and in the process, you're neglecting your other cases, ones with actual merit." He stepped into my tiny office, forcing me to back up against my desk. "Go home, Diana. Get some rest. Maybe take a few days off. You look like hell." The dismissal was clear, but I couldn't let it go. "Sir, please, just look at what I've found. 5 judges, all receiving payments from the same offshore account. 3 politicians photographed at the same private club. Sealed records in cases that should be public. This is real." "What's real is that you're becoming obsessed," Hendrik said, his voice softening in a way that was somehow worse than his anger. "I'm concerned about you. We all are. This kind of stress, this level of paranoia, it's not healthy." Paranoia. The word stung because I'd been using it myself, in my darker moments when I wondered if I was losing my mind. But I wasn't paranoid. I couldn't be. "I'm not paranoid," I said, but my voice wavered. "Someone is following me. Someone broke into my apartment. Someone keeps calling and hanging up." Hendrik sighed, running a hand over his face. He looked tired, I realized. Older than his 52 years. "Have you filed a police report?" I hesitated. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't know who I can trust. Because half the judges I'm investigating have connections to the police department. Because I'm terrified that filing a report will make me a bigger target." "I don't have proof," I said instead. "Just a feeling." "Feelings aren't evidence, Diana. You of all people should know that." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Go home. That's not a suggestion. And on Monday we'll talk about reassigning your caseload to something more appropriate." He left before I could argue further, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. I stood frozen in my tiny office, surrounded by evidence that no one else seemed to see as important. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I gathered my things with mechanical efficiency. Laptop, phone. The key files I couldn't leave unattended. My coat. The building was nearly empty at 7:30 on a Friday night. My footsteps echoed in the stairwell as I descended from the 4th floor, each floor taking me further from the safety of familiar territory and closer to the street where anything could be waiting. The parking garage was poorly lit, shadows pooling between the concrete pillars. My car sat in its usual spot, a modest sedan that had seen better days. I approached it cautiously, keys already in hand, thumb on the panic button. Nothing seemed disturbed, no one lurking nearby. But my skin prickled with awareness, every instinct screaming danger even though I couldn't see the threat. I got in quickly, locking the doors before starting the engine. The familiar rumble was comforting, something normal and predictable in a world that had become anything but. The drive through downtown should have taken 20 minutes. Friday night traffic was heavy, brake lights stretching ahead in an unbroken chain of red. But I took the long route anyway, making random turns, doubling back, checking my rearview mirror obsessively. A black SUV appeared 3 turns in, then again, 2 blocks later. By the 5th time I saw it, my hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I wasn't paranoid. Someone was following me. My phone rang, the sudden sound making me swerve. Unknown number. My heart hammered as I pressed ignore, but it rang again immediately, then again. Whoever it was, they were persistent. On the 4th call, I answered, my voice sharp. "Who is this?" Silence, then breathing. Heavy and deliberate. "Stop calling me," I demanded, but my voice cracked with fear. Click. The line went dead. In my mirror, the black SUV was closer now, close enough that I could see 2 figures in the front seat, their faces obscured by tinted glass and shadow. I made a sudden turn onto a side street, my tires squealing. The SUV followed. My breath came in short gasps, panic clawing at my throat. I needed somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses, somewhere they couldn't just grab me off the street. My mind raced through options. The police station, But what if the officers on duty were compromised? My apartment, but they probably knew where I lived. A friend's place, but I didn't want to put anyone else in danger. Then I saw it. Giovanni's. An upscale Italian restaurant, the kind of place where city officials and wealthy businessmen came to be seen. The parking lot was full, expensive cars glittering under decorative lights. Perfect. I pulled in, parking haphazardly across 2 spaces. The SUV drove past slowly, the tinted windows revealing nothing. I sat frozen, watching it disappear around the corner. But I knew they hadn't gone far. They were waiting, watching. My hands shook as I gathered my things. I couldn't stay in the car. But what was I doing? Walking into a restaurant full of the same people I was investigating. It was insane. But it was also my best option. Whatever was happening, whoever was following me, they wouldn't dare do anything in front of dozens of witnesses. Would they? I walked toward the entrance on unsteady legs, my heels clicking against the pavement. The restaurant's warm glow spilled through large windows, showing me glimpses of the world inside. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses. A doorman opened the door for me, his professional smile faltering slightly as he took in my appearance. I must have looked as terrified as I felt. "Welcome to Giovanni's, miss. Do you have a reservation?" My voice failed. I cleared my throat, trying again. "No, but I'd like a table. Please, anywhere." He consulted his podium, frowning. "We're quite fully booked this evening. Perhaps if you'd called ahead." "Please," I interrupted, and I could hear the desperation in my voice. "I just need somewhere to sit. Anywhere. I'll wait at the bar." Something in my expression must have convinced him because he nodded slowly. "Of course. Right this way." He led me through the main dining room. I tried not to stare at the faces around me, but I couldn't help cataloging them. There, in the corner, Judge Brennan. At the bar, Councilman Torres. Near the window, District Attorney Walsh with his wife. All people I'd been investigating. All people who might be part of the conspiracy. All people who might want me silent. My legs nearly gave out. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I couldn't leave now. Not with the black SUV probably still circling outside. So I followed the doorman to a small table near the back, partially hidden by a decorative screen. "Your server will be with you shortly," he said, then disappeared back toward the entrance. I sat down carefully, my back to the wall, positioned so I could see both the entrance and the main dining room. My purse sat heavy on my lap, my phone clutched in one sweaty hand. I needed a plan. Call the police, I decided. File a report about the SUV. Create a paper trail. Something that would make it harder for me to just disappear. I pulled a napkin from the table setting, my hands still trembling. The white linen was thick and soft, expensive. I smoothed it out on the table, then reached for a pen in my purse. My mind blank with fear and exhaustion, I wrote the only thing I could think of. 2 words that encompassed everything I was feeling, everything I needed. Help. A shadow fell across the table. "Is everything all right, miss?" I looked up, meeting the concerned eyes of a waiter. Young, probably early 20s, with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Marco. The words stuck in my throat. How did I explain? How did I tell this stranger that I was being followed? That I was investigating a conspiracy? That I'd walked into this restaurant because I had nowhere else to go? "Could you—" I swallowed hard. "Could you call the police? I think someone is following me." His expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Of course. Let me get the manager." He hurried away, and I sat there clutching the napkin with help written on it. My last desperate plea to a universe that seemed determined to silence me. I didn't see the man approaching from the other side of the restaurant. Didn't notice the shift in attention as other diners turned to watch him move through the room with the kind of presence that commanded notice. I didn't know that my life was about to change completely. I didn't know that writing help on that napkin would set in motion events that I couldn't stop, couldn't control, couldn't escape. I didn't know that at a table in the VIP section, Dominic Russo had just been handed my napkin by a curious busboy who'd found it and thought the boss should see. I didn't know anything except fear, and in that moment, that was all I had. The manager appeared within minutes, a thin man with graying hair and the practiced calm of someone accustomed to handling delicate situations. He introduced himself as Vincent and ushered me into a small office behind the kitchen, away from curious eyes. "Miss, you said someone is following you?" His voice was gentle, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Or was it suspicion? "Would you like me to call the police?" I opened my mouth to say yes, then hesitated. The black SUV, the unknown calls, the feeling of being watched constantly. What if the police were part of it? What if filing a report only made things worse? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not sure who I can trust. Vincent's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. "Wait here," he said. "I need to speak with someone." He left before I could protest, closing the door behind him. I sat in the small office surrounded by filing cabinets and schedules, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The sounds of the kitchen filtered through the walls, muffled voices and the clatter of dishes creating a strange soundtrack to my panic. Minutes passed. 5, then 10. I checked my phone obsessively, but there were no new calls, no new messages. Just the weight of silence and my own spiraling thoughts. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Vincent who entered. The man who walked in commanded the space immediately. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp and clean-shaven. But it was his eyes that struck me, dark and intense, assessing me with an intelligence that made me feel exposed. He moved with a predator's grace, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the small room. "Diana Matthews," he said, and it wasn't a question. He knew my name. "I'm Dominic Russo." The name should have meant something to me. I could see that expectation in his eyes, but my mind was too fractured by fear and exhaustion to place it. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, though my voice shook. A slight smile touched his lips, more acknowledgement than amusement. "You're a federal prosecutor. You've been on the news recently, talking about your investigation into judicial corruption." He moved closer, and I instinctively pressed back against my chair. "You've been asking dangerous questions, Diana. Questions that make powerful people very uncomfortable." "I don't understand." My hands gripped the armrests of the chair. "Who are you? Why do you care?" "Because someone brought me this." He reached into his jacket pocket and I flinched, half expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a white napkin. My napkin. The one I'd written help on. My face burned with humiliation. I didn't mean for anyone to see that. But someone did. He set the napkin on the desk between us, smoothing it out so the desperate word was clearly visible. And that someone brought it to me because in this restaurant, in my city, when someone asks for help, I'm the one who decides what happens next. The implication in his words finally broke through my panic. My city. The possessive way he said it. The deference of the staff. The fact that he'd been summoned when I asked for help. I trailed off, my throat dry. "You're Dominic Russo. The Dominic Russo." I see my reputation precedes me." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down with casual elegance, as if we were having a business meeting instead of whatever this was. "Now tell me, Diana, why does a federal prosecutor walk into my restaurant looking terrified and write 'help' on a napkin? I should have left, should have run. Dominic Russo wasn't just a restaurant owner or a businessman. He was the head of the most powerful crime family in the city, a man who controlled everything from the docks to the courts through a network of influence and intimidation that made him untouchable. I'd been investigating corruption, and I'd just walked straight into the office of one of the most corrupt men in the city. But I didn't run. Because despite everything, despite knowing what he was, there was something in his eyes that made me believe he was actually listening, actually waiting for my answer. "Someone is following me," I said finally. "I've been investigating a case, judicial corruption, blackmail, and someone doesn't want me to finish." The words came faster now, spilling out. "They've been in my apartment. They call and hang up. Tonight, a black SUV followed me through downtown. I didn't know where else to go." Dominic listened without interrupting, his dark eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away. "Describe the SUV," he said. "Black. Tinted windows. 2 people inside, I think. They followed me for at least 15 minutes before I came here. And your case, this corruption investigation. What exactly have you uncovered?" I hesitated. Everything I'd found was confidential, part of an ongoing investigation. Sharing it with a known crime boss was not just unethical, it was potentially illegal. But I was also terrified and running out of options. "Judges are being blackmailed," I said quietly. "Someone has compromising information on at least 5 sitting judges. Photos, financial records, personal secrets. They're using it to influence court decisions, case outcomes. And it's not just judges. Politicians, police officials, anyone with power. And you think this organization is now targeting you? I know they are." I pulled out my phone, showing him the log of unknown calls. 17 calls in the last 3 days, all unknown numbers, all hang-ups. My mail has been opened. My apartment door was unlocked when I came home yesterday. These aren't coincidences. Dominic's expression darkened. He reached for my phone, and I let him take it, too exhausted to protest. He scrolled through the call log, his jaw tightening with each swipe. "These numbers," he said slowly. "Some of them I recognize." "You do?" He set the phone down, meeting my eyes. "Diana, the organization you're investigating, the one blackmailing officials, it's run by a man named Anthony Castellano. He's a rival of mine, someone who's been trying to expand his territory for years. And his methods are exactly what you've described. Blackmail, intimidation, corruption." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Dominic said it, with barely restrained contempt, told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. "So you're saying," I tried to process what he was telling me, "I've been investigating your rival?" Unknowingly, it seems, but yes. He stood, pacing the small office. "Castellano doesn't play by any code. He has no honor, no rules. If he's decided you're a threat, he won't stop until you're silenced. Permanently." The word hung in the air between us. Permanently. Meaning dead. "I can go to witness protection," I said, though the idea terrified me. "The FBI, they have programs." "That take weeks to arrange," Dominic interrupted. "Weeks of paperwork and protocols. You don't have weeks, Diana. You probably don't have days." "Then what am I supposed to do?" The frustration in my voice bordered on hysteria. "Just wait for them to kill me?" He turned to face me, and something in his expression shifted. "No, you accept my protection. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Your protection? You're a criminal. Why would you help me? Because Castellano is my enemy, he said simply. And because what he's doing, this blackmail scheme, it's bad for business. It destabilizes the city, makes people unpredictable. I prefer a more orderly approach to influence. How comforting, I said sarcastically. One crime boss wants me dead, so I should trust another crime boss to keep me alive. That's insane. Perhaps. He moved closer, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. But it's also your only option. Castellano's men are probably still outside, waiting for you to leave. If you walk out of here alone, you won't make it to your car. The certainty in his voice made my blood run cold. How do you know that? Because it's what I would do. He pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. If I wanted someone silenced, I'd wait until they felt safe enough to leave their sanctuary. Then I'd take them somewhere private and make sure they never talked again. My hands started shaking again. This is insane. This whole situation is insane. Yes, Dominic agreed, but it's also real. So you have a choice, Diana. Walk out of here and take your chances with Castellano's men, or accept my protection and live to continue your investigation. Why? I demanded. Why do you care about my investigation? What's in it for you? A slow smile spread across his face, and for the first time, I saw a hint of the dangerous man beneath the polished exterior. Because if you can build a case against Castellano, if you can prove his blackmail operation and bring him down legally, it solves a problem for me without me having to get my hands dirty. You want justice. I want him gone. Our interests align. You want me to be bait, I realized. That's what this is. You'll protect me so I can gather evidence against your rival. Then you'll use my case to eliminate your competition. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement, he said smoothly. You get protection and the resources to finish your investigation. I get Castellano removed from the board. Everyone wins. Except I'm working with a known criminal to take down another criminal. My career would be over. My credibility destroyed. Your career will definitely be over if you're dead, Dominic pointed out. And your credibility won't matter much from a grave. He had a point, as much as I hated to admit it. I looked down at the napkin on the desk, at the desperate word I'd written. Help. And now help had arrived, in the most unexpected and inappropriate form possible. If I agree, I said slowly, what exactly does your protection entail? You'll stay at one of my properties. Secure location, armed guards, everything you need. You'll continue your investigation with the full resources of my organization at your disposal. Information, witnesses, documentation, whatever you need to build your case. And in exchange, you share everything you find with me. Every piece of evidence, every connection, every witness. And when you're ready to bring charges, you make sure they stick. I stood up, needing to move, to think. This was wrong on every possible level. Accepting help from Dominic Russo would compromise everything I believed in, everything I'd worked for. It would make me complicit in his criminal enterprise, blur the lines between right and wrong in ways I might never be able to come back from. But he was also right. If I left this restaurant alone, I probably wouldn't survive the night. And if I died, all the evidence I'd gathered, all the victims of Castellano's blackmail scheme, would remain trapped in his web. I need guarantees, I said finally. Written documentation of this arrangement, something that proves I was acting under duress, that I had no other options. Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly. You want a contract with the mob. That's unusual. Those are my terms. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. I'll have something drawn up. But Diana, understand this. Once you accept my protection, you're under it completely. That means you do what I say, when I say it. You don't leave the safe house without permission. You don't contact anyone without my knowledge, and you absolutely do not try to run. So, I'm trading one prison for another. You're accepting temporary restrictions to stay alive, he corrected. There's a difference. A knock on the door interrupted us. A man entered, tall and muscular with a scar running down his left cheek. He whispered something to Dominic, whose expression hardened. "We need to move," Dominic said to me. "Castellano's men are getting impatient. They've moved into the parking lot." My heart jumped into my throat. "They're here? Inside?" "Just the lot, but we can't wait any longer." He held out his hand. "What's it going to be, Diana? My protection or your pride?" I looked at his outstretched hand, then at the door, knowing what waited for me beyond it. This was the moment, the decision that would define everything that came after. I thought about the evidence in my apartment, the victims whose lives had been destroyed by blackmail, the justice system corrupted by fear and leverage. If I died tonight, all of that would be buried with me. I took his hand. His grip was firm and warm, his skin slightly rough against mine. "I protect," he said, his voice carrying the weight of an oath. And just like that, my life as I knew it was over. Dominic moved with swift efficiency, his hand still gripping mine as he led me out of the office. The man with the scar, who Dominic called Marcus, walked ahead of us, speaking quietly into a phone. The kitchen staff barely glanced up as we passed through, as if federal prosecutors being escorted through their workspace by the city's most notorious crime boss was an everyday occurrence. We exited through a back door into a narrow alley. The night air was cold against my face, carrying the smell of garbage and rain. A black car waited with the engine running, sleek and expensive, nothing like the SUV that had been following me. "Get in," Dominic instructed, opening the back door. I hesitated, reality crashing over me in waves. This was it, the point of no return. Once I got in that car, I was choosing this path, accepting help from a criminal, crossing a line I could never uncross. "Diana." Dominic's voice was patient but firm. "They're circling to the back. We have maybe 2 minutes." I got in. The leather seats were soft and still warm from the heater. Dominic slid in beside me, and Marcus took the front passenger seat next to the driver, a young man with sharp eyes and faster reflexes. "Go," Dominic ordered, and the car pulled smoothly out of the alley. I twisted in my seat, looking back at Giovanni's. Sure enough, I could see figures moving in the parking lot, converging on where we'd just been. My stomach churned with the realization of how close I'd come. "Where are we going?" I asked, forcing my voice to steady. "Somewhere safe," Dominic replied, pulling out his phone. He typed rapidly, then made a call. "It's done. Yes, she's with me. Prepare the North House, full security detail. And Victor, I want eyes on Castellano's movements. If he so much as breathes wrong, I want to know about it." He ended the call and turned his attention back to me. I could feel his gaze, assessing and calculating. I kept my eyes on the window, watching the city lights blur past as we headed north, away from downtown, away from everything familiar. "You're going to have questions," Dominic said after several minutes of silence. "I'd prefer if you ask them now, rather than letting them fester." I turned to face him. In the dim light of the car's interior, his features were all sharp angles and shadow, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure, like a knife blade catching light. "How did you know who I was?" I asked. "When you walked into that office, you already knew my name, my case, everything." "You've been in the news," he said simply. "A young prosecutor taking on judicial corruption. It made headlines. And I make it my business to know what's happening in my city." "Your city," I repeated. "You say that like you own it." "In many ways, I do." There was no arrogance in his tone, just statement of fact. I control the ports, several unions, most of the construction contracts. I have interests in restaurants, real estate, legitimate businesses, and yes, some less legitimate ones. But I maintain order. I keep the violence contained. I operate by a code. A code? I scoffed. Is that supposed to make what you do acceptable? No, he said quietly, but it makes it predictable. People know where they stand with me. If they're loyal, they're protected. If they betray me, there are consequences. But I don't hurt innocents. I don't prey on the weak, and I sure as hell don't blackmail judges and politicians to manipulate the legal system. Just bribe them instead? A slight smile touched his lips. I prefer the term strategic donations. And yes, I have relationships with various officials, but they're based on mutual benefit, not coercion. Castellano's methods are different. He finds secrets, exploits weaknesses, destroys lives. He's everything I'm not. You're both criminals, I pointed out. True, but there are levels to everything, Diana. Shades of gray. You've been a prosecutor long enough to know that. I did know that, in theory. But sitting in a car with Dominic Russo, accepting his protection, depending on him to keep me alive, made those shades of gray feel dangerously dark. The car turned onto a private road, trees closing in on either side. We drove for another 10 minutes before gates appeared, massive and iron, topped with security cameras. They swung open as we approached, closing behind us with a definitive clang. The house beyond was stunning. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within like a beacon. Manicured gardens surrounded it, and I could see the glint of water beyond, probably a pool or a lake. It looked like something from a magazine, a millionaire's retreat, not a safe house for a terrified prosecutor. This is where I'll be staying? I asked, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. This is one of my homes, Dominic confirmed. I thought you'd be more comfortable here than at one of the more utilitarian locations. It has everything you'll need. Bedroom, office space, kitchen, security. The car stopped at the front entrance, and Marcus opened my door. I stepped out onto pristine pavement, my legs unsteady. Everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of my life and into someone else's. A woman appeared at the door, older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes, her expression warm but professional. Diana, this is Elena, Dominic introduced us. She manages this property and will make sure you have everything you need. Welcome, Miss Matthews, Elena said, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. Please, come inside. You must be exhausted. I followed her into the house, Dominic close behind. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, tasteful artwork on the walls. It felt more like a luxury hotel than a prison. Your room is on the 2nd floor, Elena said, gesturing to a sweeping staircase. I've prepared it for you. Fresh linens, toiletries, everything you should need. If there's anything else, just ask. Thank you, I managed. Dominic touched my elbow, guiding me toward a sitting room off the main entrance. Elena, give us a few minutes. She nodded and disappeared, leaving us alone in the elegant space. Dominic closed the door and turned to face me, his expression serious. We need to establish some ground rules, he said. This arrangement only works if you follow them. I remember. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone. Do what you say. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. It's for your protection, Diana. Castellano has resources. If he finds out where you are, all of this is for nothing. I understand. I sank into one of the armchairs, suddenly feeling the full weight of the day's events. But I need to know something. This protection, this arrangement, what exactly do you expect from me? I told you. Continue your investigation. Build your case against Castellano. And then? And then you bring him down legally. You arrest him, you put him on trial, you make sure he goes away for a very long time. While you take over his territory, I said flatly. Dominic didn't deny it. His operations will need to be absorbed by someone. Better me than another Castellano rising to take his place. At least you know what you're getting with me. Do I? I challenged. I don't know you at all, Dominic. For all I know, you're exactly the same as him, or worse. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. He moved to the window, looking out at the dark gardens. For a long moment he didn't speak, and I wondered if I'd pushed too far. 5 years ago, he said finally, his voice quiet. I was engaged to be married. Her name was Isabella. She was a teacher, completely uninvolved in my business. Sweet, kind, everything I wasn't. He paused, his hands clenching at his sides. Castellano found out about her. He decided to use her as leverage, to force me to give up some of my territory. He kidnapped her, held her for 3 days, sent me photos of what he was doing to her. My breath caught. What happened? I gave him what he wanted, paid the ransom, got Isabella back. His voice was flat now, emotionless. But she was never the same. The things he did to her, the trauma, it broke something inside her. She left me 6 months later, said she couldn't live in my world anymore, couldn't risk being used against me again. She moved across the country, changed her name, cut all contact. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Don't be. He turned back to face me. It taught me a valuable lesson about Castellano. He has no boundaries, no code, no honor. He's a rabid dog that needs to be put down. And you're going to help me do it. Because I'm convenient, I said. Because I walked into your restaurant at exactly the right moment. Because you're a federal prosecutor with the skill and determination to actually build a case that will stick, he corrected. I've been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. Someone outside my organization, someone with legal authority, someone who wants Castellano gone as much as I do. I stood, needing to pace, to move. The room felt too small suddenly, the situation too overwhelming. This is insane. You realize that, right? I'm a federal prosecutor. I took an oath to uphold the law, and now I'm hiding in a crime boss's mansion, agreeing to work with him to take down his rival. This is the definition of corruption. Or survival, Dominic said. Depends on your perspective. My perspective is that I've compromised everything I believe in. You're still alive to believe in it. He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. Diana, I understand your conflict. I do. But right now, tonight, you made the only choice that kept you breathing. Everything else, the ethics, the morality, the consequences, those are tomorrow's problems. Easy for you to say, I muttered. Actually, it's not. His voice held an edge I hadn't heard before. You think I wanted to become this? You think I woke up one day and decided to be a criminal? I was born into this life, Diana. My father ran this organization before me. I inherited his empire and his enemies. I've spent my entire adult life trying to legitimize the businesses, to reduce the violence, to create something that could eventually become legal. But men like Castellano make that impossible. I looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Weariness, frustration, maybe even regret. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I need you to understand that we're not so different, you and I. We both want a better city. We just have different methods of achieving it. Your methods include murder and extortion, when necessary, but I prefer negotiation and mutual benefit. Violence is expensive and messy. It draws attention. I'd much rather have allies than enemies. Is that what I am now? An ally? I prefer to think of you as a partner. Temporary, conditional, but a partner nonetheless. A knock on the door interrupted us. Marcus entered, his expression grim. We have a problem. Castellanos put a price on her head. $500,000 to anyone who brings her in alive. $1 million if they bring proof she's dead. My legs gave out. I sat down hard, the air rushing from my lungs. $1 million. I was worth $1 million dead. Double our security, Dominic ordered. No one in or out without my explicit approval. And Marcus, I want to know everyone Castellano talks to, everywhere he goes. If he's making a move, I want to know before he does. Marcus nodded and left. Dominic knelt in front of me, his dark eyes intense. Diana, look at me. I forced myself to meet his gaze. You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you. Do you understand? Why? The question came out as a whisper. Why do you care? You barely know me. I'm just a prosecutor who stumbled into your restaurant. His hand came up, cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness. Because I protect what's mine. And right now, whether you like it or not, you're mine to protect. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened me, should have made me pull away. But instead, I felt something else. Something that terrified me more than Castellano's bounty, or the SUV that had followed me, or the unknown future stretching ahead. I felt safe. For the first time in months, with a known criminal's hand on my face and $1 million bounty on my head. I felt safe. And that, more than anything else that had happened tonight, told me just how far I'd fallen. Dominic stood, his hand dropping away. Elena will show you to your room. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning how to bring Castellano down. He left before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him. I sat alone in the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury that felt like a gilded cage, and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Elena appeared a few minutes later, her expression kind but unreadable. Come, Miss Matthews. You've had a long day. I followed her up the stairs, my body moving on autopilot while my mind raced. She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was bigger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed with silk sheets. A private bathroom with a soaking tub. Windows that overlooked the gardens, though I noticed they were fitted with security sensors. Is there anything you need? Elena asked. My things, I said. My laptop, my files, everything from my apartment. Mr. Russo anticipated that. They're being collected now and will be delivered first thing in the morning. Of course he had. Dominic seemed to anticipate everything. Then I guess I have everything I need, I said, though it felt like a lie. Elena nodded and left, closing the door behind her. I heard the soft click of a lock engaging. Whether it was to keep others out or keep me in, I wasn't sure. I moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. Somewhere out there, Castellano was looking for me, planning how to collect his bounty. And here I was, protected by his enemy, dependent on a criminal to keep me alive. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass. I barely recognized the woman looking back. Federal prosecutor Diana Matthews, who'd always believed in the system, in justice, in doing things the right way. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone I didn't know yet. Someone who'd chosen survival over principle. Someone who'd accepted a devil's bargain because the alternative was death. I touched the glass, my fingers leaving marks on the cold surface. What have I done? I whispered to my reflection. But the woman in the window had no answers. Only questions that would haunt me through the long night ahead. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the black SUV, heard the breathing on the phone, felt the weight of $1 million bounty pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. The bed was comfortable, more comfortable than anything I'd ever slept on. but comfort felt obscene when my life had become a bargaining chip between warring criminals. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the security-fitted windows. I'd spent most of the night sitting in the armchair by the window, watching the grounds, half expecting armed men to storm the property. But nothing happened. Just the peaceful quiet of a secure estate and the distant sound of birds beginning their morning songs. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Miss Matthews?" Elena's voice. "May I come in?" "Yes," I called, my voice rough from disuse. She entered carrying a tray with coffee and fresh pastries, the scent making my stomach growl despite my anxiety. "I thought you might be awake. Mr. Russo would like to see you at 9. I've brought you some breakfast and laid out clothes in the closet. Your personal items arrived an hour ago and are in the office downstairs." I checked my phone. 7:30, 90 minutes to pull myself together and face whatever came next. "Thank you," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. The first sip was perfect, strong and hot, exactly what I needed. Elena moved to the windows, opening the curtains fully to reveal the morning. The grounds were beautiful in daylight, manicured lawns stretching to a tree line, a stone pathway winding through gardens that probably bloomed spectacularly in spring. It looked like paradise. It felt like a prison. "The clothes may not be exactly your style," Elena said, "but they should fit. Mr. Russo had them selected based on your size from public photos." The casual invasion of privacy should have angered me more than it did, but I was too tired for anger, too overwhelmed by everything else to care that Dominic Russo had somehow determined my clothing size from photographs. After Elena left, I showered, letting hot water pound against my shoulders until my skin turned pink. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries, designer brands I recognized but had never been able to afford. I used them mechanically, washing away the previous day, even though I knew the memory of it would linger far longer than any physical residue. The closet revealed a wardrobe that could have belonged to a completely different person. Elegant dresses, tailored pants, silk blouses, all in neutral tones and my exact size. I chose simple black slacks and a cream-colored blouse, professional enough to remind myself who I was, even if I'd temporarily forgotten. At precisely 9 o'clock, Elena returned to escort me downstairs. We walked through the house in daylight, and I could see details I'd missed the night before. The artwork on the walls was genuine, pieces that belonged in museums. The furniture was antique, carefully maintained, worth more than most people earned in a year. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated over generations, of power that didn't need to announce itself, because everyone already knew it was there. Dominic waited in what Elena called the library, though it was more like something from a Gothic novel. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked both decorative and actually read. A massive desk dominated one corner, its surface covered with papers and a laptop. Windows overlooked the gardens, and a sitting area with leather chairs created an intimate space near a cold fireplace. He stood when I entered, dressed more casually than the night before, in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The informality somehow made him more intimidating, revealing the strength in his forearms, the way he moved with unconscious grace. "Diana," he greeted me. "I hope you slept well." "I didn't," I said honestly. "But I'm here." A slight smile touched his lips. "Honesty. I appreciate that." He gestured to the sitting area. "Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss." I took one of the leather chairs, sinking into it despite my intention to remain rigid and formal. Dominic sat across from me, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Your files arrived," he said, gesturing to several boxes stacked near the desk. "Everything from your apartment, including your laptop and work documents. I had my people catalog it all but touch nothing. Your investigation is yours, Diana. I won't interfere with your methods." "How generous," I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. You only kidnapped me and brought me to your estate under threat of death. I saved your life, he corrected, his tone mild. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now it feels like I traded one captor for another. Dominic leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his intense gaze locked on mine. You're not a prisoner here, Diana. You're a guest under protection. There are rules, yes, for your safety and mine. But this isn't a cage. It's a sanctuary. A sanctuary I can't leave. Not yet, he agreed. Not until we've neutralized the threat. But that's what we're going to do. Together. I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. The conviction in his voice was almost hypnotic, making me want to believe him, to trust him, even though every logical part of my brain screamed that this was wrong. Tell me about your investigation, Dominic said, shifting the subject. What have you found? What were you close to discovering that made Castellano target you? I hesitated, old instincts about confidentiality warring with current reality. But what did confidentiality matter now? I was sitting in a crime boss's library, my life dependent on his protection. The normal rules no longer applied. 5 judges, I began slowly, all receiving payments from offshore accounts. The transactions were hidden, layered through shell companies, but I traced them back to a single source. At first, I thought it was simple bribery, pay the judges, get favorable rulings, standard corruption. But it wasn't, Dominic said. No, the payments were always followed by photographs, judges caught in compromising positions, with mistresses with drugs, in situations that would destroy their careers and families if made public. The payments weren't bribes, they were blackmail. Dominic's expression darkened. Castellano's signature. He finds weaknesses and exploits them. It wasn't just judges, I continued, warming to my subject despite myself. 3 city council members, 2 state senators, the deputy police commissioner, all compromised, all controlled. I started mapping the connections, the cases that were affected, the legislation that passed because of these influences. And someone noticed, Dominic finished. Someone noticed, I confirmed. About 2 weeks ago, my apartment was searched. Nothing was taken, nothing obviously disturbed. But I could tell someone had been there. Then the calls started, the feeling of being followed. Yesterday was just the culmination. Do you have copies of your evidence? Backup somewhere safe? I nodded. Cloud storage, encrypted, and a physical backup in a safety deposit box at my bank. I'm not stupid. I knew this investigation was dangerous. Smart, Dominic approved. We'll need all of it. Every document, every photograph, every connection you've traced. I have resources you don't. People who can dig deeper, find information that's not in public records. Criminal resources, I said. Effective resources, he corrected. Diana, you can have your moral high ground, or you can have results. Right now, you can't have both. The bluntness of it stung, because it was true. I'd spent 3 months gathering evidence through legal channels, and it had nearly gotten me killed. Dominic was offering me something different. Illegal, unethical, but potentially more effective. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. He stood, moving to his desk and pulling out a folder. Castellano's operation has 3 pillars. The blackmail network you've been investigating, a money laundering operation through various businesses, and a protection racket that extorts local companies. Each pillar supports the others. Take one down, and the whole structure becomes unstable. He laid out photographs and documents on the coffee table between us. I recognized some from my own investigation, but there were others, information I'd never seen. Financial records, surveillance photos, organizational charts that mapped out Castellano's entire empire. How did you get all this? I breathed. I've been watching him for years, Dominic said. Building a case in my own way. But I can't use it. It's not legally obtained, wouldn't hold up in court, and would expose my own operations in the process. But you can use it. As starting points, leads to follow through legitimate channels. I studied the documents, my prosecutor's mind already racing through possibilities. If I could verify even half of this through legal means, get warrants based on probable cause, build parallel evidence. You could bury him, Dominic finished, completely and permanently. It was tempting. So tempting. Everything I'd been searching for, laid out in front of me. Yes, the source was tainted. But if I could recreate the evidence legally, if I could build an independent case. There's something else, Dominic said, pulling out another folder. Something I found yesterday after learning about your situation. He handed me a photograph. It showed a man I didn't recognize entering a building. The image quality was high, professional surveillance. This is Vincent Callahan, Dominic said. He works for Castellano. He's also been seen multiple times at the federal prosecutor's building where you work. My blood ran cold. Someone in my office is compromised. Not just compromised, actively working for Castellano. Possibly your supervisor, Richard Hendricks. No, I said immediately. Hendricks is. He's been a prosecutor for 25 years. He has a spotless record. He also has a gambling problem, Dominic said quietly. Lost nearly $200,000 over the past year. Money he couldn't possibly have on a prosecutor's salary. That debt was purchased by one of Castellano's front companies 6 months ago. He showed me more documents, casino records, bank statements, phone logs, all pointing to the same conclusion. Hendricks was owned by Castellano. That's why he kept dismissing my concerns, I realized. Why he wanted me to drop the investigation. He wasn't protecting the system. He was protecting Castellano. And reporting everything you found directly back to him, Dominic added. Every piece of evidence you gathered, every witness you interviewed, Castellano knew about it. I felt sick. My own supervisor, someone I'd trusted, had betrayed not just me but everything the prosecutor's office was supposed to stand for. We need to arrest him, bring charges for corruption, obstruction of justice. We can't, Dominic interrupted. Not yet. If we move on Hendricks, Castellano will know we're coming. He'll destroy evidence, disappear witnesses, maybe even flee. We need to let Hendricks think everything is normal while we build our case. You mean I need to let him think I'm dead? I said slowly, understanding. If Castellano believes he succeeded in silencing me, he'll relax his guard. Exactly. Dominic sat back down, his expression serious. For this to work, Diana Matthews needs to disappear, at least officially. No contact with your old life, no social media, nothing that indicates you're still alive and working the case. You want me to fake my death. I want you to go dark, he clarified. Let Castellano think he won, then hit him when he's not expecting it. I stood, needing to move, to process. This was beyond anything I'd imagined. Not just accepting protection, but actively participating in a deception, using Dominic's criminal network to build a legal case, becoming someone I didn't recognize. I need guarantees, I said, turning to face him. Written guarantees that nothing I do here will be used against me. That when this is over, I walk away clean. You'll have them, Dominic promised. My lawyer will draw up documents. Immunity for any actions taken under duress, protection from prosecution, everything you need. And what do you get? I asked. Besides Castellano's territory? He stood, moving closer until we were only a few feet apart. I get a city without a rabid dog running loose. I get to sleep at night knowing the man who destroyed Isabella won't hurt anyone else. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, I get the satisfaction of seeing justice actually served for once. There was something raw in his voice, something that made me believe he actually meant it. That beneath the criminal exterior, there was someone who understood the concept of justice, even if his methods were unorthodox. "I need to think," I said. "You have until tonight," Dominic replied. "Castellano is moving quickly. He's already consolidating his operation, preparing for expansion. If we don't act soon, he'll become untouchable. And if I say no, then I'll keep you safe until it's clear to leave, and you'll go back to your life missing your one chance to actually stop him." He paused. "But you won't say no, Diana, because you're like me. You see what needs to be done, and you'll do whatever it takes to achieve it, even if it means compromising your principles." "You don't know me," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Don't I?" He smiled slightly. "You walked into a restaurant full of people you were investigating. You accepted help from a known criminal. You're standing here now, considering my proposal instead of demanding to leave. You're stronger than you think, Diana, and more flexible in your morality than you'd like to admit." The accuracy of his assessment was infuriating. "That doesn't mean I trust you." "Good," he said. "Trust is earned, not given. But we don't need trust for this arrangement to work. We just need mutual benefit and shared goals." A knock interrupted us. Marcus entered, his expression grave. "We have a situation. Castellano's people found her car. They're spreading word that she's missing, presumed dead. The news is already picking it up." Dominic looked at me, his dark eyes intense. "It started, Diana. Castellano thinks he's won. This is our opening. The question is, are you ready to use it?" I thought about my apartment, my job, my old life. All of it gone now, destroyed by a case I'd been too stubborn to drop, and a criminal I'd been too naive to fear. I thought about the judges and politicians trapped in Castellano's web, the victims of his blackmail living in constant terror. I thought about who I'd been yesterday, and who I'd have to become to survive tomorrow. "Show me everything," I said finally. "Every file, every connection, every piece of evidence you have. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." Dominic's smile was slow and satisfied, like a predator scenting victory. "Welcome to the war, Diana Matthews. Let's go destroy Anthony Castellano." And with those words, I sealed my fate. No longer prosecutor, no longer victim. Something new, something undefined. Something that scared me more than Castellano's bounty or Dominic's protection ever could. A weapon. Sharp and dangerous, and aimed directly at the heart of corruption. God help me, but I was ready. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of documentation and discovery. Every morning I woke in the silk sheets of my gilded cage, and every morning I descended to the library where Dominic had set up a complete prosecution war room, whiteboards covered in connections and timelines, boxes of evidence, both his illegally obtained materials and my legitimate files. 2 additional laptops with encrypted connections and software I didn't ask about. Elena brought meals at regular intervals, always perfectly prepared, always served with quiet efficiency. I barely tasted them. My world had narrowed to patterns of corruption, financial trails, witness statements that needed corroboration. Dominic worked alongside me most days, his presence both distracting and oddly comforting. He was different than I'd expected. Sharp, yes, with a mind that could track multiple threads simultaneously and see connections I missed. But also patient, willing to explain the criminal side of operations in ways that helped me understand how to build legal cases around them. He never touched the actual evidence, never contaminated the chain of custody. Everything he provided was filtered through intermediaries, laundered through legitimate sources until I could use it without compromising the case. "Here," he said one afternoon, sliding a folder across the table. We'd been working for 6 hours straight, my eyes burning from screen glare and concentration. Financial records for Judge Brennan. My people traced the offshore account to a subsidiary of a subsidiary, 5 layers deep, But it all comes back to Castellano. I opened the folder, scanning the documents. Bank statements, wire transfer records, corporate filings. All damning, all inadmissible in court because of how they were obtained. I need legal access to these accounts, a warrant based on probable cause. Already in motion, Dominic said. I have someone at the IRS who owes me a favor. Anonymous tip about suspicious transactions. They'll open an investigation, get subpoenas through proper channels. Give it a week, and you'll have legitimate copies of everything in that folder. I should have been horrified at the casual corruption. Instead, I was grateful. The pragmatism of it, the efficiency, was seductive. Why spend months fighting through bureaucracy when Dominic could make a phone call and accomplish the same thing? You're getting comfortable with this, Dominic observed, watching me. The shortcuts, the gray areas. I'm getting desperate, I corrected. But he wasn't wrong. The longer I stayed in his world, the more the lines blurred between right and wrong, legal and effective. How long have you been doing this? Running this organization? I inherited it when I was 26, he said, leaning back in his chair. My father was killed by a rival family. Shotgun blast outside his favorite restaurant. They didn't even have the decency to wait until he was alone. My mother was with him. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. He was a monster. Dominic's voice was flat, emotionless. Violent, paranoid, cruel. He ruled through fear and brutality. When I took over, I made changes. Established rules, codes of conduct. I wanted to build something different, something that could eventually transition into legitimate business. By running protection rackets and bribing officials, by reducing violence, limiting civilian casualties, creating stability. He met my eyes. You think I'm evil, Diana. I understand that, but I've prevented more bloodshed than I've caused. Under my father, there were gang wars every few months, bodies in the streets, innocent people caught in crossfire. I ended that. I made peace with the other families, established territories, created order from chaos. You're still a criminal. Yes, he agreed simply. But I'm a criminal who keeps his word, who protects those under his care, who operates by a code that Castellano abandoned years ago. That has to count for something. I wanted to argue, to maintain my moral superiority. But 3 weeks of working beside him had shown me things I couldn't ignore. The way his people looked at him with respect rather than fear. The stories Elena told about families he'd helped, businesses he'd saved, children whose medical bills he'd paid anonymously. He was a criminal, yes, but a complicated one. Tell me about Isabella, I said, changing the subject to something I'd been curious about since he first mentioned her. You said Castellano destroyed her. What exactly happened? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. He kept her in a warehouse for 3 days, didn't feed her, barely gave her water, photographed her, sent me pictures every 6 hours to show me she was alive but suffering. When I finally got her back, she was traumatized, wouldn't speak, couldn't sleep, jumped at every sound. That's torture. That's Castellano. His hands clenched into fists. He didn't just want my territory. He wanted to break me, to show everyone I was weak. And he succeeded. I gave him what he wanted, because I couldn't stand to see her suffer. 6 months later, Isabella left me. Said she couldn't live with the constant fear. Couldn't be with someone whose world was so dangerous. I haven't spoken to her since. Do you blame her? No, he said quietly. I blame myself for bringing her into this life. And I blame Castellano for taking away the one thing I actually cared about. The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. This wasn't the confident crime boss, the man who commanded respect with a look. This was someone carrying old wounds, old regrets. Is that why you're really helping me? I asked. Revenge? Partially, he admitted. But also because he's bad for business, bad for the city, and needs to be stopped. You're giving me the opportunity to do that without starting a war that would kill dozens of people. That's worth a lot. Before I could respond, Marcus entered without knocking, his expression urgent. We have a problem. Castellano just moved on Judge Brennan. Called in his marker, demanded a ruling in a case tomorrow. Brennan refused. Dominic was on his feet instantly. What happened? Castellano sent muscle. They grabbed Brennan's daughter from her college campus, sent him a video of her tied up, crying. He's got 24 hours to rule the right way, or the daughter disappears permanently. My heart sank. Judge Brennan had a daughter, Emily, 20 years old, studying pre-law. I'd seen her photo in the evidence files, smiling and innocent, with no idea her father was trapped in a nightmare. Where is she? I demanded. We don't know yet, Marcus said, but we're looking. Every resource we have is on it. I looked at Dominic, seeing the calculation in his eyes. We have to find her. We have to get her back. We will, he said, but his tone suggested it wouldn't be easy. Marcus, get Victor and the team. I want eyes on every property Castellano owns or has access to. Warehouses, storage units, apartments, everything. And monitor police frequencies. If anyone reports suspicious activity, I want to know immediately. Marcus left, already pulling out his phone. Dominic turned to me, his expression serious. This changes things. Castellano's getting aggressive, which means he's either desperate or confident. Neither is good for us. We can use this, I said, my prosecutor's mind already working. Kidnapping across state lines is federal. If we can prove Castellano ordered it, we can bring federal charges. Much harder to corrupt a federal judge than a local one. First, we have to find the girl, Dominic said, and we have less than 24 hours to do it. The next hours were a masterclass in organized crime efficiency. Dominic's network spread across the city like a spider's web, every contact activated, every resource deployed. I watched from the library as he coordinated the search, his phone constantly ringing with updates, his commands precise and immediate. Eastside warehouse is clear. Nothing at the storage facility on 5th. Residential property in Brooklyn shows no activity. Each negative report tightened the knot in my stomach. Emily Brennan was out there somewhere, terrified and alone, while we systematically searched every possible location. Time was running out. At midnight, I was half asleep at the table, my head on my arms, when Dominic's voice cut through my exhaustion. We found her. I jerked awake. Where? Old textile factory in Queens. Castellano's using it as a temporary holding facility. 2 guards outside, probably more inside. Victor's team is in position, waiting for my order. Call the police, I said immediately. Give them an anonymous tip. The police will take too long, Dominic said. They'll need to get warrants, coordinate SWAT, go through channels. Emily doesn't have that kind of time. By the time they move, Castellano will have been notified and moved her somewhere we can't find. So, what are you suggesting? His dark eyes met mine. I go in. Get the girl. Bring her back to her father. That's illegal. Vigilante action. If you're caught... I won't be caught, he interrupted. And more importantly, Emily Brennan will be safe. Isn't that what matters? He was right, and I hated that he was right. The legal system was too slow, too bound by procedure. Emily needed immediate action, the kind that only someone like Dominic could provide. Do it, I said, the words feeling like betrayal and salvation in equal measure. But no one gets killed. No excessive force. Get her out. Get her safe. That's all. Agreed. He was already moving toward the door, pulling on a jacket. Stay here. This won't take long. I'm coming with you, I said, standing. He turned, surprise clear on his face. Absolutely not. She's going to be terrified. She'll have been held by armed men for hours. The last thing she needs is to be rescued by more armed men. She needs to see a woman, someone non-threatening, someone who can reassure her that she's actually being saved. Dominic studied me for a long moment. You understand what you're doing? You're crossing from witness to participant. From someone who accepted help to someone actively engaging in criminal activity. I'm saving a girl's life, I said. That's all that matters. A slow smile spread across his face, admiration clear in his eyes. You're not who I thought you were, Diana Matthews. Neither are you, Dominic Russo. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of a black SUV, wearing dark clothing Elena had provided, and a bulletproof vest that felt heavy and alien against my chest. Marcus drove, his face set in professional concentration. Another car with Victor and his team followed close behind. The textile factory loomed against the night sky, a hulking skeleton of industrial decay. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth. Graffiti covered the lower walls. A single light burned on the second floor, barely visible through grimy glass. 2 guards at the east entrance, Victor's voice came through the radio. 1 guard at the west loading dock, all armed. Non-lethal takedowns only, Dominic ordered. We're ghosts. In and out, no trace. I watched as his team moved with military precision, shadows separating from shadows, approaching the building from multiple angles. This was Dominic's other life, the one I'd only seen hints of. Not the businessman in expensive suits, but the commander of an efficient, dangerous organization. 3 soft thuds, almost simultaneous. Guards are down, Victor reported. Building is secure for entry. Dominic turned to me. Stay close. Do exactly what I say. If something goes wrong, Marcus will get you out. Understood? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We entered through the east entrance, stepping over an unconscious guard. The interior was dark and smelled of mold and decay. Dominic moved with confidence, clearly familiar with this kind of operation. I followed, my heart hammering, every shadow a potential threat. Stairs led up to the second floor where the light burned. We climbed silently, Dominic first, then me, then Marcus. At the top, a hallway stretched into darkness. The lit room was at the end, door partially open. Dominic held up a hand, signaling us to stop. He moved forward alone, peering through the crack. Then he was through the door, moving so fast I barely tracked it. A muffled grunt, the sound of impact, and then silence. Clear, he called softly. I rushed in. The room was bare except for a chair in the center where a young woman sat bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Emily Brennan, bruised but alive. Emily, I said gently, approaching slowly with my hands visible. My name is Diana. We're here to take you home to your father. You're safe now. She made muffled sounds behind the gag, tears streaming down her face. I carefully removed it while Dominic cut the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. You're okay, I repeated. We're going to get you out of here. Emily collapsed against me, sobbing. I held her, this girl I'd never met, feeling the weight of what we'd just done. Illegal, unethical, completely outside any legal authority I possessed. And absolutely the right thing. We need to move, Marcus said from the doorway. Shift change in 15 minutes. Dominic lifted Emily easily, carrying her like she weighed nothing. We retraced our steps, moving quickly through the dark building and out into the night. Emily was placed in the SUV, wrapped in a blanket, still crying but safe. Take her to her father, Dominic instructed Marcus. Anonymous drop-off, No contact. Make sure Brennan understands his daughter's safety depends on his cooperation with Diana's investigation. The SUV pulled away, leaving Dominic and me standing in the shadows of the decrepit factory. Police sirens wailed in the distance, probably responding to reports of the unconscious guards. "We should go," I said. "In a moment." Dominic looked at me, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "You did well tonight. I broke about a dozen laws." "You saved a girl's life," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I asked, echoing his words from our first meeting. "Because right now, it feels like I'm becoming exactly what I swore I'd never be. A criminal who justifies their actions with good intentions." "Welcome to the real world," Dominic said softly, "where good people do bad things for good reasons, and bad people sometimes do good things for bad reasons. It's all gray, Diana. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes." "I don't want it to be easy," I said. "I don't want to stop feeling conflicted about breaking the law." "Then don't," he said. "Hold on to that conflict. It's what separates us from Castellano. We still care about the cost of our actions. He never did." We drove back to the estate in silence, the weight of what we'd done settling over me like a shroud. I'd crossed a line tonight, stepped from observer to participant, from prosecutor to vigilante. And the terrifying part was how right it had felt, how easy it had been to justify, how little I regretted it. Back in my room, I stood at the window, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere in the city, Emily Brennan was being reunited with her father. Judge Brennan, who would now have every reason to cooperate with my investigation against Castellano. One more piece moved into position. One more step closer to bringing down a monster. One more compromise of my principles. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, and I wondered how many more compromises it would take before I no longer recognized the woman looking back. The news broke 3 days after Emily Brennan's rescue. Judge Brennan, in a stunning reversal, ruled against Castellano's interests in a high-profile racketeering case, then immediately requested protective custody and offered to testify against organized crime operations. The media exploded with speculation. Legal analysts called it unprecedented. Castellano, according to Dominic's sources, went into a rage that resulted in 2 of his own men being hospitalized. "He's unraveling," Dominic said, standing at the window of the library. Morning light cast his profile in sharp relief, emphasizing the hard lines of his jaw and the calculating intelligence in his dark eyes. Making mistakes, acting on emotion instead of strategy. It's exactly what we wanted. I looked up from the documents I'd been reviewing. Case law on RICO statutes and conspiracy charges. 6 weeks had passed since that desperate night at Giovanni's. 6 weeks of living in Dominic's world, breathing his air, learning his methods. 6 weeks of building a prosecution that would either revolutionize organized crime law or destroy my career completely. "Brennan's testimony alone isn't enough," I said. "We need corroboration, multiple witnesses, a pattern of behavior that proves systematic corruption. One judge isn't sufficient. Which is why we're not stopping with Brennan." Dominic moved to the table, spreading out new photographs. Councilman Torres, State Senator Williams, Deputy Commissioner Marks. All of them are ready to flip. All of them have families Castellano has threatened. All of them want out from under his control. And all of them are willing to testify? With the right incentives and protections, yes. He looked at me, his expression serious. "But it has to happen fast, Diana. Castellano knows something is wrong. He's consolidating his operations, moving money offshore, preparing to either fight or flee. We have a window, maybe 2 weeks, before he disappears completely. 2 weeks to build a case that had taken Castellano years to create. 2 weeks to coordinate with the FBI. secure witness protection for multiple high-profile individuals, and compile evidence that would survive appeals all the way to the Supreme Court. It was impossible. It was also our only chance. "I need to reach out to the FBI," I said. "Officially. I can't do this alone anymore." Dominic's expression tightened. "The moment you surface, Castellano will know you're alive. He'll accelerate his timeline, possibly go underground permanently. Or he'll make a mistake trying to silence me again," I countered. "Either way, we can't wait any longer. I'm a federal prosecutor, Dominic. I need federal resources, legal authority, official sanction. What we've been doing here, it's been useful, but it's not sustainable." "You're right," he said, surprising me. "I've known for a while that we'd reach this point. I've already made arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Before he could answer, Marcus burst through the door without knocking, his face pale. "We have a problem. Castellano just moved on the Brennan family again. Judge Brennan is fine, still in protective custody, but his wife was shopping downtown with their son. 2 of Castellano's men grabbed the boy right off the street." The document slipped from my hands. "Emily's brother. How old?" 16, Marcus said grimly. "Witnesses say he struggled, but they forced him into a van. Happened 20 minutes ago." Dominic's face went cold, that dangerous stillness I'd learned to recognize. "This is retaliation for Brennan's testimony. Castellano's sending a message." "Then we send one back," I said, already moving toward the door. "Where do we think they took him?" "Diana, wait." Dominic caught my arm. "This is different from Emily. They took her for leverage. They took the boy for revenge. Castellano might already have given the order." The implication hit me like a physical blow. They might kill him. Not as leverage, but as punishment. A message written in blood to anyone who considered betraying Anthony Castellano. "Then we have even less time," I said, shaking off his grip. "Every second we waste arguing is a second that boy is in danger." "I'm not arguing," Dominic said. "I'm telling you what we're facing. This isn't a rescue mission anymore. This is war." "Then let's go to war." Something shifted in his expression, approval mixed with concern. "Marcus, mobilize everyone. I want every location Castellano uses mapped and searched simultaneously. And Marcus, weapons free. If they resist, put them down." "Dominic, no," I started. "This isn't a debate," he cut me off, his voice hard. "Castellano crossed a line. He took a child for execution. I won't risk my people's lives by restricting their ability to defend themselves. You'll start a bloodbath." "Castellano already started it," he said flatly. "We're just finishing it." The next hour was chaos. Dominic's organization mobilized with military efficiency. Teams dispatched to 12 locations simultaneously. I sat in the library, monitoring radio communications, feeling useless and terrified. This was beyond anything I'd imagined, beyond rescue missions and legal gray areas. This was actual warfare between criminal organizations, and I'd helped precipitate it. East Warehouse is clear. Nothing at the marina. Industrial Park shows activity, checking now. Each report increased my anxiety. Time was running out for Michael Brennan, a teenager whose only crime was being his father's son. Then Victor's voice crackled through. "We have them. Shipping container yard on the waterfront. Multiple hostiles. Visual confirmation of the target. He's alive, but they're preparing to move him." "All teams converge," Dominic ordered. "Diana, you're staying here." "No," I said, standing. "If this goes wrong, if people die, I need to be there. I need to witness what I've caused." "You didn't cause this. Castellano did. I provided the catalyst. I'm coming." We locked eyes, a battle of wills that lasted several heartbeats. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "Stay behind me. Do not engage. If shooting starts, you hit the ground. Understood?" "Understood." The shipping container yard was a maze of metal boxes stacked 3 high, creating corridors and dead ends. The perfect place for an ambush. Or a trap. Dominic's team moved in formation, weapons drawn, communicating through hand signals and whispered commands. I followed at the rear with Marcus, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. We found them in the center of the yard, near a crane that loomed against the night sky. 4 men, all armed, surrounding a shipping container. The door was open, and I could see movement inside. Michael Brennan, tied to a chair, his face bruised and swollen. "Castellano's not here," Victor reported quietly. "He sent his lieutenant, Carlo Vega. The others are just muscle." "Can we extract the boy without engagement?" Dominic asked. "Negative. They're too close, too alert. Any approach will be seen." Dominic considered for a moment, then stepped out from cover, his hands visible and empty. "Carlo," he called, "let's talk." The men spun toward his voice, weapons raised. Carlo Vega was a lean man with dead eyes and a reputation for brutality. "Russo," he said, his tone almost amused. "I was hoping you'd show up. Makes this more interesting." "The boy has nothing to do with our business," Dominic said calmly. "Let him go, and you and your men walk away. No one needs to die tonight." "But someone does need to die," Carlo countered. "Mr. Castellano was very specific. The judge betrayed him, so the judge's son pays the price. It's simple economics. There's nothing simple about murdering a child. He's 16, not a child anymore." Carlo gestured to one of his men, who moved toward the container. "But tell you what, Russo, I'll make you a deal. You walk away now, and I'll make it quick. The kid won't suffer. That's more mercy than Castellano would show." I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stepped out from cover before Marcus could stop me. "My name is Diana Matthews," I called. "Federal prosecutor. Let Michael Brennan go, and I'll guarantee you immunity. Full protection, witness relocation, everything you need to escape Castellano." Carlo's attention shifted to me, his eyes widening slightly. "You're the prosecutor everyone thinks is dead." "Obviously not. And in about 5 minutes, the FBI is going to arrive here with arrest warrants for everyone associated with Anthony Castellano. You can be arrested or you can be a witness. Your choice." It was a complete bluff. The FBI knew nothing about this location, and I had no authority to offer immunity deals. But Carlo didn't know that. "She's lying," one of his men said. "Maybe," Carlo replied. "Or maybe Russo got himself a pet prosecutor to legitimize his war against Castellano." He studied me with calculating eyes. "What's the deal worth to you, Ms. Matthews?" "Everything you know about Castellano's operation. Names, locations, financial records, blackmail files. Complete cooperation in exchange for immunity and protection. And if I refuse? Then Dominic's team takes you down, Michael Brennan gets rescued anyway, and you either die here or spend the rest of your life in prison as a cop killer." I let that sink in. Because the moment you hurt that boy, this stops being about organized crime and becomes about murdering the son of a federal witness. That's death penalty territory, Carlo. Is your loyalty to Castellano really worth your life? Silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the hum of the city. Carlo's men shifted nervously, looking to him for direction. Michael Brennan watched from the container, hope and terror warring in his young face. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Carlo asked finally. "Because unlike Castellano, I actually believe in the rule of law," I said. "And because Dominic Russo is standing right there watching, if I betray you, you think he'll let that slide? Honor among thieves, Carlo. Sometimes that's worth more than legal contracts." Carlo looked at Dominic, who nodded once. "She keeps her word, And if she doesn't, I'll make it right. You have my guarantee." The moment stretched impossibly long. Then Carlo lowered his weapon. "Get the kid out," he told his men. "We're done here." Michael Brennan was released, stumbling from the container on unsteady legs. Marcus moved forward to catch him, guiding him away from Castellano's men. I didn't breathe until they were clear, until Michael was behind our lines and relatively safe. "The FBI will contact you within 24 hours, I told Carlo. "Stay visible, stay accessible. If you run, the deal is void." "I'll be waiting," he said. Then to Dominic, "This isn't over between Castellano and you." "No," Dominic agreed, "but it's close. Very close." We withdrew in good order. No shots fired, no casualties. A miracle, considering how badly it could have gone. Michael Brennan was checked over by a doctor on Dominic's payroll, treated for minor injuries, then reunited with his parents in protective custody. Judge Brennan wept when he saw his son alive. "Thank you," he said to me, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my family." I wanted to tell him I'd also endangered his family, that my investigation had painted a target on everyone he loved. But I just nodded and promised his cooperation would mean something, would help bring down the organization that terrorized him. Back at the estate, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I collapsed in the library, my body shaking with delayed adrenaline. Dominic appeared with brandy, pressing a glass into my hands. "Drink," he ordered. I did, the burn of alcohol grounding me. I lied to Carlo Vega. I have no authority to offer immunity deals. "I know," Dominic said. "And the FBI doesn't know about tonight, about any of this." "They will," he said. "I've arranged a meeting for tomorrow. You, me, and FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres. She's clean, incorruptible, and has been trying to build a case against Castellano for years. She'll listen." "You've been planning this." "Since the beginning," he admitted. "I always knew we'd need federal involvement eventually. I just wanted you to be ready first, to understand what you were facing, what Castellano was capable of. If you'd gone to the FBI 6 weeks ago, they would have dismissed your evidence as tainted, your methods as compromised. Now you have witnesses, corroboration, and a prosecutor who's willing to stake her career on this case. You've been manipulating me," I realized. "This entire time, you've been positioning me exactly where you needed me." "Yes," he said simply. "But I've also been protecting you, training you, preparing you for the fight ahead. Everything I've done has been to ensure Castellano goes down and you survive the process. I should have been angry, should have felt used. Instead, I felt something else, gratitude mixed with understanding. Dominic had given me what I needed, even when I didn't know I needed it." "Why?" I asked. "Really, truly, why help me?" He sat across from me, his dark eyes intense. "Because you walked into my restaurant with help written on a napkin, and something in me responded. Because you're brave and stubborn, and refuse to compromise your principles even when it would be easier. Because working with you these past weeks has reminded me why I started trying to legitimize my business in the first place. And because I'm useful against Castellano." "That too," he admitted. "I won't lie to you, Diana. You're useful. But you're also more than that. You're someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Someone who sees the good in people even when they're drowning in bad. Someone who—" He trailed off, something vulnerable flashing across his face. "Someone who what?" I prompted. "Someone who matters," he finished quietly. The air between us changed, charged with something I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. The long hours working side by side. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The casual touches that lingered too long. The conversations that went too deep. "Dominic," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This can't happen. Whatever you're feeling, whatever I'm feeling, it can't happen. Why not? Because you're a criminal and I'm a prosecutor. Because everything about this is wrong. Because when this is over, we go back to being enemies. Do we? He leaned forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Or do we become something else? Something neither of us expected? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know anything anymore. 6 weeks ago I knew exactly who I was, what I believed, where my lines were. Now I've crossed so many lines I can't even see where they were anymore. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Dominic said softly. Maybe rigid lines make rigid people. Maybe learning to bend, to adapt, to see in shades of gray. Maybe that makes you better at what you do. Or maybe it just makes me corrupt. There's a difference between corrupt and pragmatic. Corrupt is selling out for personal gain. Pragmatic is doing what works, even when it's hard, even when it costs you. His hand covered mine on the armrest. You're not corrupt, Diana. You're the most honest person I've ever met. You just learned that honesty sometimes requires unconventional methods. I looked at our joined hands, his fingers dark against my pale skin. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong, and yet it felt more right than anything in my life had felt in years. The FBI meeting, I said, forcing myself back to practical matters. Tomorrow. What do I say? The truth, Dominic replied. That you've been investigating Castellano's blackmail operation. That you had to go dark to stay alive. That you now have multiple witnesses ready to testify and evidence to support RICO charges. You don't mention me or my involvement. You position it all as your own investigation, your own sources. I lie to the FBI. You omit certain details for operational security, he corrected. There's a difference. More shades of gray. Welcome to my world. The meeting with FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres took place at a neutral location, a private conference room at a hotel downtown. Dominic waited outside while I presented my case, 6 weeks of evidence compiled into a damning portrait of systematic corruption. Agent Torres was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and skeptical, with the bearing of someone who'd seen every con and heard every lie. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. The judges, the politicians, the blackmail files, the pattern of coercion and control. This is extensive, she said when I finished. Almost too extensive. How did you gather this much information while presumed dead? Carefully, I said, and with help from sources I can't reveal without compromising their safety. Criminal sources. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Sources with access to information I couldn't obtain through legal channels. But everything I'm presenting can be corroborated through legitimate means. Subpoenas, warrants, witness testimony. The foundation is solid. And you're willing to testify to all of this? Go on record about your investigation? Yes. Everything except my sources. Agent Torres studied me for a long moment. You know this will destroy your career. Even if we bring down Castellano, the methods you used, the lines you crossed, they'll come out eventually. You'll never practice law again. I know, I said, and meant it. But Castellano will be stopped. The people he's blackmailed will be free. The system will be cleaner. That's worth my career. She nodded slowly. All right, I'll take this to my superiors. If they agree, we'll need you in protective custody, official witness status, full cooperation. I can do that. And your source, the one who helped you gather all this? I thought about Dominic, waiting outside. About everything he'd done, everything he'd risked, to help me. About the impossibility of what existed between us. Will remain confidential, I said firmly. Agent Torres's expression suggested she knew exactly who my source was, but she didn't push. Welcome back to the world of the living, Prosecutor Matthews. Try to stay that way. I left the hotel feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The FBI was involved. This was official now. Legitimate. Everything I'd been working toward. I'd crossed lines to get here, compromised principles, done things I never imagined myself capable of. But I'd also survived, built a case, and was about to bring down one of the most dangerous criminals in the city. Dominic waited by his car, his expression carefully neutral. How did it go? They're in. Full investigation, witness protection for everyone who testifies, coordinated raids on all of Castellano's operations. I smiled, feeling something like hope for the first time in weeks. We did it, Dominic. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. I just helped. You did more than help. You saved my life, multiple times. You gave me the resources and protection I needed to finish this. I paused. What happens now? Between us? I don't know, he said honestly. You'll go into federal custody. I'll return to running my organization. Castellano will be arrested, and his territory will be up for grabs. We'll both be busy with our respective worlds. So this is goodbye? Temporarily, he said. Because, Diana, I meant what I said. You matter. And when this is over, when you've testified and Castellano is convicted, and you've decided what comes next for you, I'll still be here. Waiting. I might not have anything left to offer, I warned. No career, no reputation, no future. You'll have yourself, he said simply. That's enough. He kissed me then, there on the street in broad daylight, a kiss that tasted of promises and impossibilities, a kiss that said goodbye and hello in the same breath. When we pulled apart, I had tears on my face. I don't know if we can ever work, Dominic. Our worlds are too different. Then maybe, he said softly, we build a new world. One where prosecutors and criminals can find common ground. One where justice doesn't require perfection, just the courage to do what's right. 3 months later, I stood in federal court and watched Anthony Castellano receive 5 consecutive life sentences for racketeering, blackmail, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. Judge Brennan testified. Carlo Vega testified. A dozen other witnesses testified. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, irrefutable. Castellano stared at me as they led him away, hatred burning in his eyes. But he was powerless now, his empire dismantled, his influence destroyed. I'd won. And yes, Agent Torres was right. My career was over. I was facing ethics hearings, possible disbarment, and a reputation permanently tarnished by my methods. But I'd also saved lives, freed victims, and cleaned corruption from the system. And when I walked out of the courthouse that day, Dominic Russo was waiting by a black car, a slight smile on his face. Congratulations, Prosecutor Matthews, he said. Former prosecutor, I corrected. Future something else, he countered. Any ideas what? I looked at him, this complicated man who'd saved me and changed me, and shown me that the world was far more gray than I'd ever imagined. I'm thinking private practice, I said. Defense attorney, maybe, representing people caught in systems they don't understand. Interesting choice. I learned from the best. He opened the car door for me. Where to? I slid in, feeling lighter than I had in months. Somewhere new, somewhere neither of us has been before. I like the sound of that. As we drove away from the courthouse, from my old life and into whatever came next, I realized something. I'd started this journey desperate for help, writing a single word on a napkin in a moment of terror. And I'd found more than help. I'd found strength I didn't know I had, courage to cross lines I'd never imagined crossing, and someone who understood that right and wrong weren't always clearly defined. I'd found myself. And maybe, just maybe, I'd found something worth building a new life around. The city glittered around us, full of possibilities and second chances. I was ready for both.